I'm Nessie, and this is my story as a late diagnosed autistic woman. Best day of my life. In August 2006, at the grand old age of 46, I experienced the most profound and arguably best day of my entire life. I learned that I'm autistic. I'm now 50-something, a neurodivergent woman, proud mother to 2 wonderful autistic ADHD children, and wife to an incredible autistic man. I'm also mum to 8, probably autistic, adorable but rather naughty cats, and friend or guardian to any animal that crosses my path. I'm a British expat currently living in Belgium, and I identify as European. I'm very internationally and diversity minded. I remember every second of my final face-to-face assessment as though it was yesterday. After a lifetime of feeling wrong, different, out of place, and as if I was always missing that something that seemed so obvious to others, my diagnosis finally made sense of everything up to that point. I felt like I had discovered the real me. I felt liberated, full of joy, and with a newfound wonder at this me that I had not previously been aware of. My only regret was not knowing sooner. Late diagnosis can mean that much damage and trauma has occurred throughout life up to that point. Due to not knowing about our differences and not having them supported or understood. At best, this may cause misunderstandings and loss of friendships, but the negative effects are often much worse than that. Abuse, trauma, bullying, gaslighting, exclusion, rejection, missed education and injustice are just some of the negative impacts that come from having neurodivergent brains without the necessary understanding, support and acceptance in society. I have several comorbidities and other health conditions, some of which were directly or indirectly caused or made worse by not being diagnosed as autistic when I was very young. Here are just a few of the conditions that I personally have experience with. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, post-viral syndrome, Addison's disease, ADHD, auditory and verbal processing disorders, depression and anxiety, and several other autoimmune conditions to boot. I'm not only neurodivergent, but diverse in many other ways, and as a physically disabled woman, I'm passionate about acceptance of all difference in society. Why I love my autistic self. Autism has brought about many challenges for me, but I would not be without it. It is me. I wouldn't let anyone take it away from me, not for £1 million. An analogy to separating the me from it, the autism, would be like separating the demon from the child in Philip Pullman's book, his Dark Materials trilogy. It makes me who I am. And I am a good human. Autism has made me the sensitive, empathetic, patient, hardworking, inquiring, philosophical, deep thinking, open-minded, creative, fun-loving, compassionate and determined woman that I have become. My emotions run deep and intense, and I'm often too empathetic, which can be painful for me. I have very strong morals and integrity. I love to please and I hate lies. I like to follow rules, although admittedly only when they make sense to me. I'm an independent thinker who often thinks outside the box. I am a free spirit. I hate to be confined by societal constraints and pointless norms. I'm intuitive and very caring. I'm creative and I can hyper-focus on things that interest me to the exclusion of all else. Not always a positive. Whatever I do, I attack it with 1,000%, and I am somewhat a perfectionist. I always do things to the very best of my ability, because for me, there's no such thing as a quick project or doing something by halves, even if I want to. And I will often deep dive into things. I'm really proud of my achievements, and although they take out a lot out of me, I think it's my autistic mind that makes them possible. I honestly don't think I could possibly live long enough or have enough lives to experience everything that I would like to. I will also try to find ways to do things that I otherwise can't or shouldn't be able to do. As my mum always said, where there's a will, there's a way. My autism, I believe, has been the reason I've been able to achieve so many varied things. I've taught myself many skills. I've had uncountable intense interests and hobbies, written and produced my own album, found art and craft skills that still astonish me, turned my hand to anything that I've needed to for my family, and had too many different jobs to list here. One of my most cherished moments was when I acted with the actress Nicole Kidman for a few seconds, in the film Grace of Monaco. As a dancer, I grew up performing on the stage, and I always felt most at ease there. It's much easier to perform on a stage than talk to someone in real life. I adore colour and nature, and I seem to feel connections with these things more strongly than others. I'm a big kid at heart, and I have a childlike sense of humour, which since my diagnosis has been able to come through more and more. I get enormous pleasure from the simple things in life, from a flower, a bee, a drop of rain, a Disney movie or a puppet show. I have a great deal of tenacity, and I seek to right wrongs where I see them. I'm always protective of the underdog, and I'm stubborn and fiercely independent too. Should this be in the downsides of my autism? I don't think so, no. I see it as positive, mostly. I also pride myself on trying to better myself, always. I don't mean in terms of status or money or anything like that, but in terms of being the best person that I can be. I can be very fixed in my views, and I try really hard to see other viewpoints and to try to work out what makes people behave in certain ways. And if I've got a bad habit or a bad thought pattern, I always try to change it to a more positive one. It's a work in progress. I'm also really proud of the fact that I am loyal and a good keeper of secrets. Not just because I forget them, but I do find it hard to bear when this isn't reciprocated by others. Once trust is broken with me, it's almost impossible to go back. Now for my autistic challenges. There are, of course, aspects of my autism that I find really difficult to live with. For example, I'm painfully sensitive to other people's emotions and moods, and I can't bear to see animals or vulnerable people harmed in any way. I struggle to watch the news as it affects me too intensely, and I simply can't cope with the emotions it causes. I'm a highly sensitive person in general and take things to heart way too much. I cry at the silliest and most inappropriate things, such as weddings of complete strangers. Whilst hyperfocus can be a good thing, a wonderful thing, it can also be a double-edged sword. In times of hyperfocus, such as writing this, I often forget to eat, drink, or perform other daily activities. I can't switch tasks, and having to do so for me is frustrating, exhausting, and completely ruins all creativity in progress. And let's be clear about this. I am rubbish at maths. I don't have any superpowers, and I'm not a savant. I can make eye contact, and I can function in society, albeit at a great cost to my health and sanity. Like many neurodivergent people, I need much more downtime and alone time than others. Social interaction is exhausting, and not least due to having to constantly mask and monitor my own tone and my responses and organise my thoughts, whilst at the same time monitoring other people's expressions and meaning, and then process what they're saying. And this all comes as naturally to me as flying a plane. I'm poor at getting my point across verbally, even when I'm semi-expert in that subject. Many times I simply end up not speaking at all. I would find it easier if I could write everything down in bullet point list and then reply. I'm envious of people, though, who can just string a cohesive sentence together with ease and never get lost if someone interrupts them mid-speech. It's a skill that still astonishes me. I am a good listener though, mainly because I'm such a poor talker. If I talk, I forget the main point of the story, or I miss out the most important bits, or I get lost mid-sentence, or I've lost my place. Or I get lost mid-sentence. It's exhausting. But ask me to talk to an audience who can't talk back, like you, whilst being allowed to prepare my notes beforehand, that's a doddle. I have several other difficulties with verbal processing and auditory processing. And oftentimes I don't process conversations immediately. Instead, my brain seems to unconsciously store them somewhere in there for playback at a later date, presumably when it has the processing power. To be honest, my brain's processor chip is slow and clunky, and several generations behind. It doesn't fire on all four cylinders, if you prefer to use a car analogy. Imagine your computer's fan whirring away loudly and at top speed whilst doing hundreds of tasks. You've got loads of windows open, multiple open windows, and it's having to currently deal with a lot. Well, that's my brain in its best state, in its most promising state. Eventually, though, the blue screen of doom will appear and all processing capacity will be out of action. This is what I call a shutdown or a meltdown in autistic terms. I can't bear small talk, and formal dinners are an absolute no-no. I shiver at the thought. I have, reluctantly, found myself in these situations in the past and have taught myself many strategies to help me cope. These include finding pets or young children to play with or entertain, doing the washing up very, very slowly, checking out the garden, spending a lot of time in the bathroom, nobody notices, turning the conversation more to my liking, cats, asking lots of questions because people seem to like talking about themselves, don't they? Even if that bores me half to death. Or my all-time favourite, high quality acting. My poor memory for things that others remember easily is another huge frustration. I'm ashamed to admit that I don't even remember important milestones and times for my children, stories I've learnt about relatives, details of important historical events or political facts. I do, however, remember random facts or details that are more often than not pretty useless. Although, to be fair, they have proved very useful in the odd quiz night or game night. But if ever I was witness to a crime, I'd be absolutely useless at describing the perpetrators' faces, their hair, their clothes, or anything else. But I would probably remember the fluffy little dog that made an appearance or the music that was playing in the cafe nearby. Despite my good IQ, my working memory and executive functions are poor. And yet I can still pass as normal. Often, though, others see me as far less intelligent than I actually am. If only I could have a euro for all the times people have said to me, "Oh, you're quite a smart cookie, aren't you?" Sigh. I struggle also with recognising faces. Another embarrassing situation. I could sit with someone for 3 hours each week for a year in a young language class, yet not recognise that same person in town at the weekend, especially if their hairstyle had changed. This is really embarrassing. Watching films is always interesting, as I won't remember who the characters are. If there are several male roles, for example, introduced, I will confuse them all and spend the entire film asking my husband if that man is the protagonist or the uncle or the brother of the main role or some other villain. Bless his patience, especially when I ask the inevitable question, have I seen this film before? I am a real home-loving person. My home is my sanctuary, and I need 8 therapy cats because one isn't enough, right? When I'm not alone, I find ways to comfort myself and lower my anxieties. My wheelchair and adapted car both have names, and I talk to them as if they were friends when I need to. My cars have always had names and become my best friends in times of stress. such as the time I got stuck in a muddy field with my little blue Fiat 500. That was a story. Her name was Edith, by the way. We also have a healthy collection of soft toys peering down on us from around the house, all named and all part of this crazy family, and I will never be able to give up my childhood dolls. They were my best friends growing up, and all of these things give me comfort and joy. Also, wherever I go, a good tip, I keep a little sensory comfort kit with me at all times. This includes noise-cancelling headphones, miniature soft toy, scented tissues, my medications, lip salve, water, phone charger, hand gel, sunglasses, moist toilet tissues. Yes, they are essential. And a list of important phone numbers, a soft scarf, and a few other personal items in case I need them. Because these things give me comfort and decrease anxiety in times of stress. I get very anxious and stressed when plans change. I plan to the nth degree, including anything and everything that could possibly go wrong. I need to be in control of myself and the things around me. If a bus or a train unexpectedly changes the route or breaks down, I find this really distressing, difficult to deal with, and I will no longer be able to think rationally and clearly. Whilst on the subject of driving, I need to know exactly where I will be able to park before I go anywhere. I always use a sat-nav, satellite navigation device, and even when I'm in my wheelchair on my own, to prevent anxiousness and disorientation. In fact, I usually have two systems. One is a backup for the other. Belgium, where I live, is renowned for its diversions. The signs here are bright orange. You really can't miss them. But they always fill me with dread, as even Mrs. Satnav can't help me out with these. Often, you'll find there's more than one of the dreaded orange disorientation devices, I call, or ODD for short, with one diversion pointing to another, all involving a long, convoluted route which is bound to get me lost, or even driving round in circles. This is when talking to my car really helps to calm me. Public transport and crowded places are difficult, as I find them overwhelming, disorientating, and very, very tiring. They're also full of smells and horrid lighting and things that steal my brain functions, steal my attention, like a hammer battling on my head. And when I drive, I prefer to drive to car parks that I know and that I can easily navigate. And if I can't park easily, then I simply won't go. Simple. That reminds me actually of a term I coined when trying to navigate a car park one particular time. It was pre-diagnosis, and I was well known for my poor skills in noticing signs, even important ones, apart from orange ones. I can never see a sign when I need to, be it the exit sign, the floor level sign, the toilet sign, or the lift. The more signs there are, the more I just can't see any single one of them. It's as if all the signs are shouting at me at the same time, telling me to notice them. Look at me, look at me, look at me. As a result, I notice none of them. And I called this sign blindness. It was meant to be a tongue-in-cheek term, but I really think it should be a real thing. And probably in the DSM-5. I, like many autistic folks, am also sensitive to various materials and textures. I'm most comfortable wearing my pyjamas all day. I detest corduroy with a vengeance, as well as some other velvet textures. All my clothes, towels and beddings have to be of a particular nature, particular texture. And I'm even fussy over different types of fleece material. I can't bear tight or restrictive clothes, wrinkles in socks or clothes labels. Socks get kicked off at the end of the day as soon as possible to free my little toes, and, well, don't even get me started on underwear. Artificial lighting also tires me out very quickly. But I do need lots of natural light to see, and paradoxically I'm also sensitive to sunlight. I'm sensory seeking at times as well, and I do love bright, glittery, colourful things such as fireworks and laser shows. And when I win the lottery, I'm going to have my own blackout room filled with such treasures. Another extreme sensitivity for me is noise. Motorbikes, dishes, pots and pans, dogs barking, lorries, helicopters and screaming children. They hurt me. These things really hurt me. And they make me want to run away and hide. Those awful hand dryers in public toilets are painful and they should be banned, in my humble opinion. I'm tempted to take a roll of out of order tape with me everywhere I go. Then I can stick it over the hand dryers and no one can use them. Unwanted noise, as I said, drains my batteries quickly. And I use noise cancelling headphones over my hearing aids that I need because I can't hear speech in noise. But that does really help a lot. Smells. Smells, they really bother me. Oh boy. My husband says I have the nose of an elephant. Don't think so. But smells, again, irritate my brain and compete for my attention, like all of the sensory sensitivities do. And if someone wears perfume or aftershave that I don't like, which is actually most of them, or is simply too strong, i.e. more than one molecule, I will not be able to concentrate and I may even experience headaches and nausea. Smells in public places are a big deterrent. And why, oh why, did some bright spark think that putting air fresheners in toilets was a good idea? That spray every 5 minutes or whatever. Sometimes it's a gain to get in and out of toilets within that 5 minutes before the next spray. My husband as well is under strict household regulations relating to his aftershave brand and quantity. It's really rather limited for the poor chap, I do admit. And as for travelling in the car together, best not use it at all if you want a peaceful and complaint-free journey. To the outsider, my organisational skills are fabulous. Do you want a themed party that's completely over the top in every way and as imaginative as the best fantasy film? I'm your girl. Want to go on a trip and need everything organised down to the minutest of details? That's a job for Super Nessie. Need someone to keep on top of 4 household members' medical appointments, medical lists, weekly tablet dispensers, symptom tracking, prescription ordering, supplies and stock levels? Piece of cake. Although, of course, it isn't really a piece of cake. In order to do these things, my brain has to work overtime. I will need lists of lists of lists. Lists everywhere. By my bed, in the shower, in the loo, in the kitchen, the bathroom, the garden shed, down the local supermarket, and everywhere in between. Files of lists, coloured pens, coloured paper, sticky notes galore. That is how I do these things so well. It's not because they come naturally and easily, but I'm good at it because I've had to be. One little word of warning about sticky notes and cats. Cats, we have 1 or 2 cats, and 1 or 2 are particularly partial to the tantalising taste of sticky notes. These little kitty delicacies will disappear overnight from our house. And there goes my super important, not to be forgotten, never to be seen again sticky note. My biggest frustration of all is the brain fog, accompanied by often severe headaches and constant fatigue due to a combination of autism and other physical conditions. It's so frustrating not to be able to remember the facts and the information that I've spent so much time learning. By rights, I should be a walking encyclopedia, ready for a spot on Mastermind. I should be able to quote all the tomes of research that I've read, and with all the devoted study that I've put into learning languages, I should be fluent in French, Dutch and German. I should have a degree in biochemistry and cats, definitely cats. And I should have an Oscar for my acting skills. But this should all serve as an example of how dangerous the very much outdated term of high-functioning autism actually is. To the outsider, I appear high-functioning. I appear functioning, able, capable, at ease, and so on. But like a duck, my feet are paddling madly under the water, whilst on the surface all is calm. But to what cost? The personal cost of all this is invisible to anyone other than close family and neurodivergent people who experience similar problems. Growing up as an autistic woman, undiagnosed. Growing up, my mum used to say I could never be bored, and she was right. This hasn't changed. I've always been very happy in my own company, and as a child I would invent games and clubs, mainly for my dolls, because for some reason I couldn't seem to keep my friends interested. Looking back, I think that was probably because I came across as rather bossy and controlling. I had little in common with other kids of my age, and hanging out or talking about things that I wasn't interested in were really boring. I remember also feeling homesick as a child. On the rare occasion I had to leave the safety of my home. And I still feel that now, actually. I don't like staying in other people's homes. I guess it's the familiarity that I miss, and yet I would rather stay in a hotel on my own than in someone's home. Neither do I really like having other people stay in my home, even if I love them, or they are close to me, or they're close friends. I just don't like it. And I don't really have the words to explain why this is, but it's just how I am. As I approached my early teens, like many spectrum girls, I began to find life increasingly difficult. I could no longer hide in my sheltered world of dolls, books and fantasy. School became much more difficult. I always had to work harder to remember the stuff that I'd learned, and there was so much to learn. And social rules, above all else, became a problem. To me, girls were scary, bitchy, two-faced, gossipy things with unspoken rules and strange obsessions about stuff that I didn't understand. This was a new club that I was forced to be part of and yet never understood the rules and regulations of. Life as an emerging adult brought with it so much pressure and uncertainty. And I actually found more solace with the other oddballs at school. And my best friend at secondary school was a boy, because there was no need to be something I wasn't with him. I just didn't have to try and follow unspoken rules. It was just very relaxed when I was with him. And then after leaving home at a very young age, compared to these days, I was somewhat vulnerable. And as an autistic girl developing into a woman, this didn't go unnoticed amongst the male population that I came into contact with. Looking back, I'm amazed that I didn't get into more dangerous situations, because I was so incredibly naive and I just didn't pick up the signs like I should have done. I landed myself in some tricky situations over the years, and I was taken advantage of on many occasions. And this is important, because this, I believe, is one of the biggest reasons that girls need to be diagnosed when they're still young and better prepared for the world that we live in. And finally, if you're still all awake, my post-diagnosis journey. After my diagnosis, I went on a roller coaster ride of emotions, and I really would have preferred to have had some post-diagnostic support to help me work through these feelings, but it either wasn't available or was really, really expensive. So there were bouts of feeling extremely sad, of grieving for what could have been different if I'd known earlier. And there was much reframing of my entire life up to that point. I felt anger at the people who should have diagnosed me sooner, and at the people who took advantage of me and hurt me. I felt regret at the things I did or didn't do and I could have done better at. I felt embarrassment for the times I'd had meltdowns and embarrassed myself. And then there was the sadness at all those missed opportunities. It was akin to bereavement in a way. I was losing something that I had grown used to for 46 years. What if things had been different? Would I have avoided so many mistakes? How much easier would life have been? Would I have got ill so young? Would I have been a better mother and wife? Would my children have been diagnosed sooner and been spared all that trauma and damage that they too had to experience? Would life have been easier for us all if my dad had been diagnosed when he was young? These questions poured into the processing centre for a long time, and of course many useless what ifs. because even if we had been diagnosed earlier, the understanding and support would not have been there in those days. It just simply wasn't there. There have also been times when I have questioned my actual diagnosis. Am I really autistic? Do I really deserve this diagnosis? Am I really different to anyone else in the world? These thoughts didn't last for long, because as soon as I came back to my reality, I realised how utterly autistic I am. And then I smiled to myself. It's a happy feeling for me. And in the words of a great song from a great musical, The Greatest Showman, this is me. The downside to telling friends and family, of course, was the inevitable, but you don't look autistic. Aren't we all a little bit autistic? It must be very mild, but only boys get that, don't they? Here it was, the invalidation, the insults really, but of course I do completely understand where these words were coming from. They came from a lack of education and awareness about autism that I myself once experienced. A misconception and a Rain Man perspective. These are meant to be words of comfort and acceptance, but at times like this I try very hard to remain calm and understand that these words are usually well-meaning, although misplaced. But I do take the opportunity whenever I can to gently and consistently educate the people in my life who are willing about autism in women. I've never directly discussed my diagnosis with members of my extended family and certain other acquaintances, but I don't hide it either. It's not that I'm ashamed at all, as I think you can see from this story, but I can predict how some people would respond, and that just wouldn't be healthy for me. I know that the comments and ensuing discussions would be painfully invalidating, upsetting and bad for my blood pressure. A bit like trying to defend myself in court. So I have become an overnight passionate advocate for autism acceptance and understanding, and in particular about the need for girls to be diagnosed at an early age. So many girls and women are misunderstood, misdiagnosed, demonised, traumatised, abused, excluded and badly damaged. This must stop, and will only do so by awareness and education. Families may try to encourage normal behaviour and rules, and if children are neurodivergent, despite their best efforts to conform, further assaults to their self-esteem, confidence and mental health will begin to pile up and compound each other. When a girl isn't accepted as the person she is by her teachers, friends, peers, at home, at after-school clubs and in society in general, the only way forward is mental ill health and a lifetime of difficulties at university, college, work, life in general, and of course, ultimately, relationships. If a girl reaches adulthood broken by these negative life experiences, she may already be on her way to a downward spiral of poor health. As life goes on, it gets harder and harder to navigate. Depression and anxiety are common by this stage, as is complex PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. What often follows is a long list of psychiatric misdiagnoses and mistreatment. Once in the hands of psychiatrists, many of whom are still tragically far behind in the understanding and diagnosing of autism in females, many women may begin to accumulate mental illness diagnoses of bipolar, borderline or psychosis, or all of the above. These are common comorbidities of autism, but should never be flippantly or lightly diagnosed simply due to a lack of awareness of the similarities between them and autism in women. And when they are coexistent, autistic women often need adjusted treatment or care, not necessarily the same as for non-autistic women. One treatment that is a prime example of this is cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT for short. The dangers of using this therapy for autistic people is well researched, but not well known. Most often, however, autism isn't even considered or raised or suspected, And even when a woman herself brings this up, the questions are often dismissed because they can make eye contact, because they are too intelligent, or because they're a woman. And the myth that autism only exists in boys is still infuriatingly pervasive amongst medical professionals. The good news, however, and it is wonderfully good news, is that with diagnosis, support, education of families and teachers and society in general, girls and women can lead the lives they deserve. They can be genuinely happy and healthy. They can be accepted and celebrated as normal in their own neurodivergent way, loved for their quirks and differences, their talents and their pure wonderfulness, allowed to blossom and to find work or contribute to society in a way that suits them, and ultimately to participate in fulfilling, loving relationships if they choose to do so. To end, these are my hopes for the future. As for the future, I feel mixed emotions. It's a good time for the neurodiversity movement right now, but I still worry for my future and for that of my children. I worry about not having people to advocate for us should we need it. I worry about losing control of everything that keeps me comfortable and regulated. I worry about where the general mindset of autism is going, possibly in the wrong direction, just as it did for Down syndrome. And I worry about the talk of fixing and curing autistic people. Autism is not a disorder. It's a difference. It can have its challenges, and it may produce disordered neurotypical behaviour on planet typical, but on planet neurodivergence, it's perfectly normal behaviour. It's disabling in a neurotypically defined and favoured world. It can be accompanied by intellectual difficulties, learning difficulties, behavioural challenges, mental illness, physical illness, or any other problems that human beings experience. But I am not disordered. I'm not wrong, and I'm not broken. I'm simply neurodivergent. I'm happy with my autism, and I consider it a gift. It makes me who I am, and I would not want to be without it. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it has been of help to some people. Thanks.